Thursday Night Tailgate, where the spotlight is always on the positive. Tune in Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time to hear your favorite NFL legends, players, and coaches sharing their stories. Now back to Chris and Bob.
I wouldn't joke about anything else that happens here tonight.
Now joining us here on Thursday Night Tailgate is former head coach Jackie Sherrill. Let me give you some background on Coach Sherrill. He's from Duncan, Oklahoma, played his college ball at Alabama, where he helped them to back-to-back national championships in 1964 and 65. He became a graduate assistant coach at Alabama in 66 and then became a graduate assistant coach over at Arkansas in 67. Spent a couple of seasons as a defensive backs coach at Iowa State and then the defensive coordinator there. From 1973 to 75, he was the defensive coordinator at Pitt. He spent 76 as the head coach at Washington State before coming back to Pitt as head coach from 1977 to 81. From 82 to 88, he was the head coach at Texas A&M, and from 1991 to 2003, the head coach at Mississippi State. He led 3 Southwest Conference championship teams. He was named the Walter Camp Coach of the Year in 1981 and the Southwest Conference Coach of the Year 3 years in a row from 1985 to 87, and we are honored to have him with us tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Coach, Chris and Bob here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris and Bob. How are y'all doing?
We're fantastic. You, Coach, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So, Coach, going all the way back to the beginning, as a kid from Duncan, Oklahoma, how did Bear Bryant get you to Alabama and keep you away from schools like Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas? How did he lure you to Alabama?
Well, when I moved to Biloxi, Mississippi, and went to high school in Biloxi, and recruited by all the schools, LSU, Mississippi State, Georgia Tech, but I was going to OU because I was the youngster that used to watch OU, and when OU had that long run and they go to Notre Dame and get beaten by Notre Dame, which ended the run, but I was going to OU. And Coach Bryant came down. They were playing in the Sugar Bowl. He came down and visited and never asked me to come, just talked about Alabama, the players, and that made my decision because I was very comfortable and to go to Alabama. And, then you go through the same thing a lot of recruits go through today, where you have coaches come and, try to change your mind. But that wasn't going to help. I was going to Alabama.
And Coach, looking over, the roster from the guys you got to play with, you played 3 years with Joe Namath there. You got 1 year there with Ken Stabler. Curious to get your memories. What were those guys like at that point in their lives? Well,
there's no question. Joe is the best athlete I ever was around as a player, as a coach. He could do anything. He ran 4.5. And back then 4.5 was pretty fast. But on the field, he was actually faster than some of our track guys that were faster on the track, but they could not outrun him on the field. But Joe could do anything. If you wanted to flip coins, or if you wanted to play pool or play basketball, he would beat you somehow.
Bob, questions for Coach?
Yeah, it's an honor to speak with you, Coach. And I see that you actually went right into coaching as an assistant right out of Alabama, Jackie. Was this something that you knew when you were going to leave as a player that you would want to be doing for a long time?
No. I went to Alabama, started off in business, in biology, and then switched to business. And I was paying my way through graduate school as a graduate coach. And I was in graduate school in business, and Bobby Roper was a great player for the University of Arkansas. He came to Alabama and was the GA at Alabama, my roommate. And so I just all of a sudden just decided I'd try to go to Arkansas, be a GA at Arkansas, but finish my master's and then go into the business world. And when I was at Arkansas, Coach Majors was on the staff. He got the job at Iowa State, and I asked him, if I could have a job, and he hired me, and that took me into coaching. And I don't know, how many coaches really feel that they're going to be a coach until they become a coach. And, I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to work for Coach Majors, play for Coach Bryant, and work for Coach Broyles. So, being able to be around all three of them and having the ability to take some stuff from all three of them certainly built the background that I had in coaching.
And Jackie, as an assistant at Iowa State, Pittsburgh, etc., you did a lot of work on the defensive side of the ball. When you became a head coach, did you find yourself gravitating toward the defensive side of the ball more, or did you understand that as a head coach, I have to give equal billing to both sides of the ball?
Both. The first, when I came back to Pittsburgh, when I took my first head coaching job at Washington State, I remember in the staff meeting, I asked who could coach the punters and kickers, special guys, and no one raised their hand. Finally, one of the coaches said, I will. We had an All-American punter at that time at Washington State. And I said, no, I will, because I'm not going to screw him up. And so I dove into coaching and spending a lot of time in special teams, and kind of later in my life, being able to go both sides. But I spent all the time, and I was the special team coach to coach the punters, kickers, snappers, and holders. And, fortunately, we had a all-conference, either first or second team as a punter and kicker every year, and had great success in the kicking game and won a lot of games. We were able to beat Washington twice. We beat them, in Seattle one year with Danny Marino. He was our punter. If we got to the 50-yard line, then we had a formation where we were in the shotgun and would either run, throw, or punt the ball, and he punted the ball out on the 4-yard line, and we caused the fumble the next play and score. And then when Washington came to Texas A&M in College Station, we beat them in the kicking game there as well.
And Coach, when you go back to Pitt and as defensive coordinator, your first year, you're there. You got a kid named Tony Dorsett. What was it like having A, Dorsett on the team, and then B, being the defensive coordinator, trying to handle him every day in practice?
Well, I coached and recruited Tony and coached, and I was on the other side, and we were having a half line drill one day, and so I'm standing on the defensive side, behind the linebacker, and of course I knew the play, and I pushed the linebacker outside to scrape, and he hit Tony and burst his chin open. And all of a sudden, here comes Coach Majors running full speed for 50 yards, hollering and screaming, and he never let me have that drill again because he wasn't going to let Tony ever get hit. But Tony, we all know what kind of player Tony was, but the first time I ever saw Tony run, he was running indoor, running the 50-meter indoor, and he actually scratched the first time meeting that he jumped, and they marked him, and if you scratch twice, you're out. So he was left in the blocks, and he catches everybody at 25 and passes them and wins by 5 yards. He could have been an Olympic sprinter, Tony is. I mean, he had another speed to him that others didn't have.
Hey, Coach, you had some great teams when you took over as head coach at Pitt, so close to winning a couple of national championships. I want to take you back to one of the greatest teams I remember.
Yeah, if that head coach had been smarter, we would have won 2 out of 3. But I don't know who that dumbass was.
Coach, one of my favorite, and I'm from Pittsburgh, so I was a huge Pitt fan growing up. And the '82 Sugar Bowl and the incredible win that you guys had over the University of Georgia, right? 42 seconds left, 4th and 5. You got the ball on Georgia's 33-yard line. I've seen some videos of you when you called timeout and you called Dan over to the sideline. Can you take us through kind of what happened, what the conversation was like, with Dan in those last few seconds then of the game?
Well, going backwards, we were number 1 in the nation for 7 weeks. And we're playing Penn State. We jump out ahead of them 14-0, and we drive down the field, and we're getting ready to score again. And Danny actually was throwing the ball out of the end zone, and their defensive back made a great play, tipped the ball, and the ball fell down. And the very next play, they throw a takeoff. And they were dropping 9 people, rushing 2, and this dumb coach kept throwing the ball. I got Danny Marino, we'll win the game. Well, instead of running the football, we lost the game. But anyway, we go play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And it probably helped us because it gave us a lot more patience and understanding. And we're down 3 points. It was a little over 2 minutes. They scored kickoff. And we moved the ball down the field. It was 4th and 3. I called Danny to the sideline, and I said, Danny, we can kick a field goal, tie the game, and then try to get the ball back and win it. Or we can go for it. He looked me right square in the eye, and he said, Coach, we're not here to tie this damn game. So I said, okay. So we actually we were going to cross our running backs. We were in split backs, cross the running backs, pick one of the linebackers to make the first down. But we had the tight end and both receivers clearing. They rushed 8 people. The backs had to stay in and block. And Danny read it and threw it to our tight end, John Brown, and made a great play. I mean, if you draw the play up, you have to execute every block and make the throw. And it wasn't any room for error because they had one more man rushing than we could protect. And Danny had to read that and make sure he got the ball off. So, as they play, it was not only a play to win, but it was a great executed play. But it was executed by a player that said, we're here to win this game.
And, Coach, one of my all-time favorite players is Hugh Green. He should have been the first defensive player, in my opinion, to win the Heisman.
Well, it was Hugh Green and Ricky Jackson. And Chris Doman and Bill Moss were backup players. Now, how many teams ever have a Hall of Famer and a great pro player, all pro? Not many teams get to have backup players that are that good. And that team was extremely talented. We had 3 in the first, we had 7 in the first 11, and I think 18 went to pro camp off that team. And like I said, if the head coach had been smarter, we would have won the national championship 2 out of the 3 years. But it was a great assemble of players. The front offensive line from left to right was Jimbo Covert, and then on the right side was Mark May. Then you had Bill Fralick, Russ Grimm, and Emil Bors. That was the front offensive line. Now you have 1 in the Hall of Fame, and you probably will end up with 2 more in the Pro Hall of Fame. But the other 2 players were pretty good too.
Bob, one more for Coach before we let him go?
Yeah, just more about Marino, Coach. Just watching Pitt play in the 70s and 80s, I think most of us knew that Dorsett was capable of doing what he would do at any level. Marino, I thought he might be a good pro. I had no idea he would go on to that type of success for so long. How about yourself, Coach? Did you have any doubts that he would, be as good as a little bit as good as he was?
No, he was a man playing in high school. He was a man playing with kids. And, when I filmed his throwing motion his freshman year, and, his throwing motion was outstanding. I told him, and I asked him who taught him how to throw the football. And he said, my dad. Well, what did he say? How did he teach you? And he said, the ball goes up and out. And we have all these quarterback gurus all over the country that said, your elbow's got to be here, the ball's got to be here. But it's very simple. The ball goes up and out. And Danny had that ability to set the ball, but also no wasted motion where the ball went up and out. And, he was able to do things, way before his time. I allowed Danny, he controlled about 85% of the game at the line of scrimmage because we had awful lot of check with me's, which meant that we would call a protection, but check with me, and he would either change the protection, call the route, or change it to a running play. And he did that about 85% of the game. And so when he went to pro ball, he was way ahead. I remember having Jack Elway in an all-star game and also a couple of other quarterbacks. And they had no idea how to check off at the line of scrimmage. But Danny did. I mean, he did that for 4 years when he was playing.
So, Coach, before we let you go, what are you doing now?
Well, fortunately, I'm very excited. I have the opportunity to help a lot of former NFL players, that some that I coached, some that I played with and coached against. A stem cell company has allowed me to some former NFL players that need help and do stem cell therapy with them, from dementia/CTE to autoimmune disease, polymyositis to shoulders, knees, backs. And it's really been rewarding because, I get to help some of my former players and other players that I played with, and they all have received benefits from their own stem cells. And eventually, we all will be getting our stem cells banked because that's the medicine of the future.
For the rest of our listeners, how can they stay up to date? How can they get in contact with you or follow you, whether it's online or it's over social media?
Well, they could certainly call me, and my number is 901-484-8256. And the players that have benefited, and there's quite a few that are in the Hall of Fame. There was one with the polymyositis, went from 250 to 180. He also developed AFib and couldn't use his left shoulder. Couldn't comb his hair, couldn't tie his shoestrings, couldn't really get dressed. In 3 months on the test, which means that's the movement test that a surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon uses. He was scored 9 out of a 30, and he went from a 9 out of a 30 to a 23 out of a 30. And so he was able to live and improve his quality of life an awful lot.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come and be a part of the show. We have so many questions that we'd like to get your insights on. We hope you'll come back and do it again sometime. It's been a real treat for us to have you as part of the show tonight.
Absolutely. I remember this kind of a sad story, fun story. When I was working with a neuroscientist, I walked in and I said, if you're smarter than a fifth grader, you can't coach. So you talk to me like I'm a fifth grader. So we got along really well.
That's great. Coach, thank you again for your time. We'll catch up with you again real soon. In between now and then, all the best to you and your family.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Good night.
That is former head coach Jackie Sherrill. Stem cell, Bob. It is certainly the thing of the future, and we certainly know a lot of guys that could probably use the help. So we got to spread that word.
Yeah, it seems like more guys in a position like Coach Sherrill and others that have been through it and have seen it and have friends that are going through it are getting involved, and that's a good thing, Chris.
All right, we've got our next guest, Tony Collins, hanging on the line. Get to Tony right after this quick station break.